I was born at Mettingham, near Bungay, on the 10th of August 1916.
What did your father do for a living?
He was a farmer.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I had 8 brothers and 5 sisters. The older ones worked on the farm, and as they got older they went different ways as the younger ones come along and worked on the farm. And that was what happened.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Brook in Norfolk.
What age were you when you left school?
14.
With what sort of education?
Just a ordinary school education.
What did you intend to do with your life then?
Thought about joining the police force, and I was advised to join the army for 3 or 4 years. So I went and joined the Guards with the intention of joining the police force. But then the war came along. As I said, I joined up in October the 7th, 1936. And so I stayed in then until 1946.
What was life like in the army before the war as a regular soldier?
That was very tough indeed. We had a very strenuous drill program and cross-country runs and all PT, etc. After the initial training at Caterham, I was posted to the 3rd Battalion at Aldershot, and then went to Purbright, and then went on leave for a month before going abroad in November 1937. The posting in Egypt was a very good posting in Alexandria. On our way out there we stopped at Gibraltar and Malta. We arrived in Alexandria on the 2nd of December 1937. We done various parades, and in January 1938 we went into the desert near the Suez Canal, done manoeuvres there for about 3 or 4 weeks, then back again to Alexandria, where we done the normal training and parades that a battalion done.
What was the purpose of an Egyptian posting at that time? Was there trouble or?
Protection of the Suez Canal.
And then what?
On the 14th of October 1938 we went to Palestine, now Israel. We had all sorts of duties in Palestine, such as searching villages for arms and one thing and another, because there was a lot of trouble out there. And then there was 400 rebels holding the old city of Jerusalem, and we had to recapture that back. We had about 3 people killed in that, and we captured that back, and then we carried on doing duties in Palestine in conjunction with the Palestine police, and we stayed there till the 12th of April 1939 when we came back to Egypt.
How did you go on for leave from these postings at that time?
We had no leave, not when we were in Palestine at all. We used to have a week's leave in the barracks, and when the war was declared on the 3rd of September 1939, we just sat there in the barracks in Alexandria until the Italians declared war, and then we went up to the desert.
What were you actually doing when the war was declared?
We were in a barrack room, sitting on the bed, and we heard it come over the wireless that the war had been declared.
What was the immediate effect on you?
Not much really. We said, well, we're here, we're all youngsters, we'll just have to take it as it come.
And what was the first thing that came?
Sandbagging up all the likely places which would get damaged from if the Italians declared war and bombed Alexandria. And we were then also sent different sections to guard the aerodromes in the vicinity. And we just carried on training for the war.
Can I ask then, in the new situation of pure theatre of war, when was the first active service you saw?
The first active service was when we went up to the desert and come in contact with the Italians. That would be June 1940.
By that time, what rank had you reached?
I was a Lance Sergeant then, and I was made a full sergeant about beginning of 1942.
You must have been by now due for some leave.
Yes, well, we had a week's leave in 1941, and we went to Alexandria.
What did you do with your leaves when normally I know that leaves were there to be enjoyed, but you were in a war situation and you didn't come home for leave. What did you do with yourselves?
Well, we went to different the pictures and went swimming at Alexandria and went out for meals and one thing and another. We then went to Saloum, and the Germans were then in Africa. We had a battle with them up above the Hellfire Pass, at Saloum, going into Cyrenaica. They sort of drove us back a bit, and we came back, I think, nearly to Merseyrac, and then we went up again, and we got in May 1942. We were outside Tobruk. I was in the anti-tank guns at that time as a full sergeant. The Germans attacked us there with tanks and one thing and another, and I was wounded. This was May 1942, but we then withdrew into Tobruk, and I managed to get out of Tobruk in an ambulance, wounded and hadn't been looked at, wounded above the eye. The Germans then attacked Tobruk, and that was the only time that was the first time they took it. They took Tobruk, and the South Africans were there, and they said that everybody had surrendered, but a company commander in the company said, "We don't surrender," and he led out 180 of our troops. He led them out towards the German lines, and then turned and went down into the desert. And the Germans didn't know. They thought they would surrendered, but they hadn't. So he got out with 180 people.
Were you taken to hospital now then?
Yes, taken from Tobruk in a convoy and stopped at one or two field hospitals on the way, and then finished up outside Alexandria.
And then what?
Came out of the hospital, went to a camp near the Suez Canal, and then joined the battalion. They were then outside in a camp near the pyramids, and the company commander then wanted somebody to go to Palestine to look after some public relations people, and he said that he would make me a temporary colour sergeant to go and discipline these chaps a little bit. So I went back to Palestine for 3 weeks. Then I came back and joined the battalion again. They were then back to Alexandria at that time in a camp. We went from there to Syria.
Did you keep that temporary rank?
No, but I did get made up then to a company quartermaster sergeant. There was 5 of us made up in one day. And then we went to Syria to re-equip and get reinforcements. We were in a camp about 5 miles outside Damascus. That was just the latter part of 1942. We had 6 inches of snow in this camp. We got reinforcements and done training. And then when we came back from Syria in 1943, we came back to Tel el-Kebir near the Suez Canal, and we re-equipped there with all new equipment, lorries, all sorts of equipment. After about a fortnight, we were up to strength then, up to war strength. We then moved up the coast road right through Merseyrac, Sidi Barrani, Tobruk and Tripoli, and joined the 8th Army in North Africa. Then we went and had a battle with the Germans where we lost a lot of men. We kept attacking the enemy then, and when the North African campaign was finished, we'd defeated the Germans at our end, and the First Army had come in from the other end, and we then had a short break there then, and we attended the Victory March in Tunis on the 20th of May 1943. At one time we went, I expect, a month living on bully beef and biscuits, sort of fried for breakfast, cold at lunch, and stewed at night time for dinner. Most of the time we were on half a gallon of water per day, per man. Sometimes we went 3 weeks without a wash and shave. You know, it was cold in the desert at night. We were on patrol and protecting the artillery most of the time from an infantry attack. We used to get shelled. And then at night time we used to what they call leaguer up. We'd all line the trucks up in a square and then put listening posts out and guards on. On occasions we sent out patrols. On one occasion I went on a patrol. We were given orders to enter the enemy lines and capture a prisoner, but we walked for miles and we never did get near the enemy lines, so it was then getting light, so we had to turn back. Well, after the Victory March in Tunis, and we reorganised, and then the battalion moved back to Tripoli, outside Tripoli, and I was made a company sergeant major then, with about 7 years service in, because we'd had a lot of casualties. Then in June 1943 we went to Pantelleria, an island in the Mediterranean, where we done a lot of training, a lot of swimming, ready for an invasion. At the beginning of September 1943 we embarked for an unknown destination, and after the 4th day we got our orders that we would be landing at Salerno. We were bombed that night before we landed, and then we landed on the 9th of September 1943. On landing we moved forward. We had an objective to get to. We were under fire. We had 1 or 2 casualties. We reached our objective and then reformed. We then moved forward to a railway line. While we were in this railway cutting, the platoons in the front were getting heavily bombarded with mortar bombs, and my company commander said he thought we should go up and see how many casualties. My advice to him was to hold on a bit until the shelling and mortar bombs had finished, and he agreed with that. And then we went forward, and we then see what casualties there was and helped to get them back. We stayed there for 2 nights, and then we moved back to a canal. We had orders to hold this canal at all costs, and on the morning about a week later we came back and we were on this canal when the company commander and the second in command were in their slit trenches, sitting on the side of their slit trenches with their servants getting some breakfast, and a shell came over and it killed the second in command and took the company commander's right arm off. We got the casualties then back to company headquarters. The RSM was at the battalion headquarters, and he asked me had I seen a ghost because I was dead white. I said no worse than that. And then another officer came and took over, and that night the Germans attacked this canal. They tried to break through, but we held them back. My company ran out of ammunition, and with the stretcher bearers I reinforced them with ammunition. We held this canal and beat off the Germans, and then it quietened down for a bit. After a time we then moved up into the hills overlooking the town of Salerno, and we were mortar bombed there every night. We had several casualties there, and on the 24th of September we had some reinforcements, including 1 young officer joined our company, and then we had orders that we were to move early hours the next morning to a position overlooking Hill .270, which was a hill held by the Germans. It had been attacked by another battalion. They failed to capture it, but our orders were to attack and capture that hill at all costs. We weighed the situation up from another hill, and the time of the attack was 12 o'clock on a two-company front, with our company on the right and the other company on the left. Well, we wound our way down through under cover of trees and grapevines into the valley and moved along the bottom of the hill. And then at 12 o'clock we attacked, and all hell let loose then. The Germans opened up with machine guns, mortars and everything. The actual hill in places got alight, and I was behind with the stretcher bearers. I decided to run forward then to see what was happening. The first casualty I came was the company commander. He was splattered from head to foot from a mortar bomb. He then gave me orders to go and see the second in command of the company, who was on with one of the platoons. I found him. He was seriously wounded. He then told me to find the next senior officer, tell him what the situation was. I then rushed back again to where I thought he would be, and I found him, he'd been killed. That left the young officer who joined us the night before. I then looked for him, and I found him, he'd been killed. I then went to see what was happening on the right flank of this hill, and as I was looking for this other platoon to see how they fared, I ran into these German machine gun posts. I ducked down and crawled back. I don't think they see me, and collected some grenades from some of the dead and wounded. Got a chap to give me cover and fire, and I then got sort of up the hill a bit, and they were on the slope. And then I wiped out the first one with the grenades. Then wiped out the second one with grenades and the boy who was giving me cover fire in his rifle. And then the third one, they ran away. And I grabbed a rifle and bayonet and chased them, but they got away. I regrouped the company and made sure that they were in a position in case the Germans counterattacked. I then sent a message back to the commanding officer that we'd captured the hill and were consolidating our position. 2 officers killed, 2 seriously wounded. Would he send an officer to command the company? And he came himself. We then tried to see how many we'd lost, but our main priority then was to get the wounded back. We got most of them back that night, and then it fell dark, so the Germans counter-attacked just before dark, but we drove them off. We then accounted for all the wounded, or nearly all of them. We had about 2 we couldn't account for, but we eventually found them. And then we went ahead burying the 16 NCOs and men that had been killed, and the 2 officers. We then formed up and marched back towards Salerno. We stopped one night on the way there in pouring rain. Everybody got wet through. Next morning we went into Salerno and got built in some houses what were empty, and everybody was told to go to sleep. I completed my casualty list and accounted for every man in the company. I then went to bed and woke up 12 hours later feeling very ill. I wouldn't tell anybody, but then I was ordered to go to the sick headquarters where I'd got malaria. So I was then sent back to Algiers, and after coming out of hospital in Algiers, I was in a camp somewhere, and then I travelled for 2 days over Africa to visit the company commander, who was in hospital there somewhere. I found out where he was. The other officer had gone to Sicily where he died, so there was only this one officer left. And then I volunteered or asked to go back to join my battalion in Italy, and there were 6 of us who'd been out there since 1937 and hadn't been back to England. And they said, well, we're sorry, you can't go back to Italy, we're sending you home. And on Christmas night 1943, we got on a boat out in Algiers Harbour and landed back in England in January 1944. We landed in Greenock, went to a camp there. I went to a barracks. They said, you'll stay the night here. 9 o'clock, they said, all guards, get packed up, you're off to London. We went back got on the train, drunk as lords. So I think from the pub we went in, everybody wanted to buy us a drink. Arrived back in London the next morning, got on a train for Purbright, and got off the train at Purbright, and the colonel of the regiment was there. He'd been to inspect troops at Purbright, and he said to me, your name? I told him. He said, you've been awarded a DCM. I said, I didn't know that. Went back to the barracks, had a month's leave, and then came back there to train the youngsters at Purbright.
Tell us about the being given the DCM itself.
On the 6th of June 1944, I went to Buckingham Palace to receive the DCM from King George VI. And at the time I was Company Sergeant Major in charge of the company down at Chequers, the Prime Minister's residence.
Yeah, but that's not the end of the affair, is it?
No. Then in September 1944, I was informed that I'd been awarded the Victoria Cross and the DCM had been cancelled.
How were you informed?
I was actually informed by Noel Whitcomb of the Daily Mirror. He came in the sergeant's mess and said, are you Mr. Peter Wright? I said, yes. He said, did you know you'd been awarded the Victoria Cross? I said, it can't be me, I've been awarded the DCM. He said, that's been cancelled and you've been awarded the Victoria Cross. I then went and contacted the commanding officer, and he said, yes, he knew something about it, and that was quite right. And then a big celebration started. It appeared that the King went out to Italy, was talking to General Alexander, who said that he thought that this man ought to have been awarded a Victoria Cross, and King George VI said, well, can't we cancel the DCM and give him the Victoria Cross? And that's what happened. And I went up to Buckingham Palace again in November and received the Victoria Cross. There was 2 VCs on the day, Major Jamison of Norfolk Regiment and myself. That was a unique occasion, of course. My wife was there and my mother. Well, I wasn't married at the time. I took the DCM with me in its case. No one asked me for it, so I kept it. And then a few years ago I gave it to the regiment, and that is now in regimental headquarters.
What did His Majesty say to you?
He said he personally altered the award from the DCM to the Victoria Cross. I said, thank you, sir.
And what about when you got outside the palace?
When we got outside the palace, of course, the press wanted photographs and wanted me to show the medal to my mother and my fiancée. And after that, well, I don't know what we had done. Went for a meal or a drink, and I had to go back to Chequers, and they went home.
How long before you were demobbed?
So I got demobbed December 1945, but my service didn't finish till the 30th of March 1946.
When you came back into civilian life, what did that award mean to you?
Not much, really. I just carried on. We were invited to garden parties at Buckingham Palace and just carried on life as normal. There wasn't much doing at the time.
Did it open any other doors?
Not really.
How many people here, where we are now, miles from anywhere, know that you are the holder of a Victoria Cross?
Well, I think a lot of them know because it's been in the paper. You know, there have been articles in the East Anglian Daily Times, and I've been on television a time or two. And of course I get demand from people like the British Legion from around, the Naval Association, Women's Institutes. I take a few salutes. I'm taking one on next Sunday at the Desert Rats Association in Norwich. So I do get a lot of demands.
And you are, I think, the member of arguably one of the most exclusive clubs in the world.
Oh yes, definitely. Yes, the Victoria Cross and George Cross Association. There's only about 46 holders of the George V.C. and somewhere about between 70 and 80 holders of the George Cross. We have a reunion every 2 years.
And of all the Victoria Cross holders you've met, is there one that you consider to be outstanding above all others?
Not really, no.
What are they basically like, these members of this unbelievably exclusive club generally?
Well, they're generally just like you and I. Yes, they're all very, they're not big heads, and they just take it for granted that they're lucky to be alive.
And when you have these meetings, which I think are now, well, as you say, every 2 years, what do you do?
Well, we have a service of remembrance at St Martin in the Field. We then have tea with our president, the Queen Mother, at St James's Palace. We then usually go to a film show. The next day, the last year or two, we've had a boat trip on the Thames. Occasionally we get invited to tea at Buckingham Palace. One year we did get invited to tea with the Queen Mother, and the next day we went to tea with the Queen at Buckingham Palace. And then on the last day we have a dinner in the Café Royal, which is attended by the members only. But I think perhaps this year, as there's getting less, or the next time, wives will be invited. There used to be 400 members of the association sat down to dinner at the Café Royal, but last year there was only 38 VCs and somewhere about 50 George Cross holders.
How does the family react to this?
Well, they just carry on normal.
What about the next year? Have you got grandchildren?
Yes, I've got 3.
Do they know much about it?
No, not yet, but they will do. They'll be interested as they grow older, no doubt.
And how much time do you spend with the little ones?
Oh, I spend as much time as possible with them, yes. I've been with one this weekend, but the other ones live in London. And because my daughter's had a broken wrist, we haven't been able to get up to London. But I like to spend as much time as possible with them.
In all this, then, any regrets?
No regrets at all.